Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lysha and I'm the owner of Lysha Be Creative. Today I'm showing you how I put together this really unique and fun design. I really enjoyed putting this together. I was in a super creative mode and so I really just wanted to show you guys how this all came together. Of course, everything will be listed and linked down in the description box as well as any discount codes I have for you to save. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Here are all the products that I'm going to be using today. There will be a few others that will kind of pop in along the video, which of course I have everything listed in the description box, but I'm using a lot of inks as sort of my base here. And then of course this really beautiful vinyl that I got from a vinyl gallery. But let's go ahead and get our cup prepped. So I'm starting with a 20-ounce skinny from Maker Flow Crafts, and I'm going to go ahead and get this just sanded. I'm not going to do any spray painting of this, and really this is something that you can actually negate if you're not going to be putting anything directly onto this cup. Like, we're adding vinyl, but vinyl will really stick to anything, and so the base prep of this is probably something you could go without. But if you're someone who already doesn't prep, then obviously this step will not be necessary for you. So we're going to go ahead and wrap our tumbler with this beautiful vinyl that I got from Vinyl Gallery. This is a floral leopard design, and on the Vinyl Gallery website there are some absolutely beautiful designs of these like floral but animal print leopard designs. I don't even know how to describe them, but I of course grabbed like basically all of them because I just couldn't resist. So we're using this like purple and pink colored one. It's got a little bit of teal in it as well, so I made sure to pick the colors that I'm going to be using as far as inks go to kind of match what's already on this patterned vinyl. So now I've just taken that vinyl and I have just measured it along my cup just to see how much of this vinyl I'll need, and I'll save those scraps for other crafts. So we're going to go ahead and get this wrapped around the cup. And so you guys have seen me wrap my tumblers with vinyl before, and you will actually see me struggle a little bit here. I don't know what was going on with me today, but I was having a heck of a time getting this piece of vinyl wrapped onto my cup. I kept getting wrinkles and bubbles, and so I had to kind of like slow myself down and kind of relax a little bit. I think I was just too excited for the design kind of all over, so I couldn't get my pattern wrapped as quickly as I normally do, but just goes to show that sometimes a piece of vinyl will humble you in your tumbler making journey, no matter how long you've been making cups for. So once I get that one side adhered to the tumbler, I'm going to go ahead and of course roll the rest of the vinyl on the cup. I like to use my squeegee tool as well as my hands to get everything kind of, laid onto the cup nicely. You could also use, and if you don't have a cup cradle, I should say, if you don't have a cup cradle, you can also use just the table surface. I tend to get things go on crooked if I don't use this. This kind of keeps my vinyl like tight up against the cup, which just makes it that much easier for me to be able to roll the vinyl on without it going on crooked or introducing more bubbles or more creases in the vinyl that I don't want. So, just some options there to use, but I know there are so many people who do it a lot of different ways. So this definitely isn't the only way to wrap on vinyl. It definitely just is the easiest that I have found for me. So after finally getting my vinyl wrapped all the way around the cup, after a little bit of struggle, I'm going to go ahead and get this final piece adhered. So I'm going to put a piece of painter's tape along the first line that I made with the vinyl. So that first line of vinyl I laid down, and then I'm going to roll the little bit of overlap I have right over this blue painter's tape. The reason why I put the blue painter's tape there is because I want to be able to cut a nice straight line. And so I'm going to use that blue painter's tape on top of the vinyl to help me better see where that line is, where the two pieces of vinyl meet, so that I can cut a better and more straight line and not have to worry about cutting through that second piece of vinyl or missing it altogether and having potentially stainless steel be exposed underneath. So just another quick tip and hack if you're someone who struggles kind of making that straight line along where the two pieces of vinyl meet. Definitely a really, easy and quick way to be able to see that line a little bit better. Now we're going to work, of course, on the top and bottom rim. So this vinyl is super stretchy, which I absolutely love because it's super forgiving, as you saw with how many times I had to kind of pull it up and adjust it as I was placing it on the cup. But it's also really easy to kind of cut through this vinyl because it is so stretchy. It does allow me to stretch it over and inside the cup or over along the bottom and not have to worry about getting any of those kind of air bubbles or creases and wrinkles as you try and wrap a piece of vinyl over, over the edge edge of something like you do with some other types of vinyl. So another plus there. So we're going to go ahead and after we've trimmed the top, we'll go ahead and get the bottom trimmed. I'm just going to use that same blue piece of tape that I used to separate the two sections that meet after we wrapped the vinyl around the cup, to just wrap this around the bottom of my tumbler here, then to be able to cut a nice straight line along the bottom. If you have a cup edging tool, of course, you could use that as well here. Great opportunity to use that. I need to get new razor blades for my cup edging tool, so it's kind of been out of service, if you will. So I've just been using a craft knife, but that works just as well. So once I have gotten this done, I've gotten all the vinyl all trimmed up. That is all that I'm going to do with this cup for right now. So this cup is going to go back on the turner. Well, not back on the turner. It's going to go on the turner for its first coats of epoxy. So I will be applying, and we are going to go into that session where I show you the epoxy process. So we are going to go and put epoxy on this cup. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I know I'm going to be doing a lot of ink work. And so in order for me to make sure that I'm not going to damage this vinyl any way, shape, or form, I want to protect those layers, or that layer of vinyl, with some epoxy. That way, in case I mess up the next couple steps, I can always, use acetone and remove all of that ink and remove all of that paint and be able to start over and not have to worry about scrapping the entire project. So now we are on my turner, I should say, and I've mixed up 30 mLs of Part A and Part B from Flint Sisters Premium Epoxy. So this has been my favorite epoxy to use, and you guys know that. I have a discount code, which is linked down in the description box in case you'd like to try it out. I definitely encourage you to, if you haven't, or if you're on the market for a new epoxy, or maybe you just want to try it, you can buy a small size to kind of try it, see what you think. I have fully switched over, and this is kind of all I've been using as of late and as of recently. So I have a couple of bottles of Facet that just have kind of been collecting dust, but hopefully I'll get to use those and other things. So after I've thoroughly mixed my epoxy, I'm going to add a little bit of Diamond Magic to my cup of epoxy because I want a nice coating of some shimmer and shine in these layers of epoxy. So we are going to add, and I am going to add a little bit of some chunky glitter too on top of this vinyl, but I also want all the other sections of the vinyl to really sparkle as well. So adding a little bit of that Diamond Magic gives just the faintest bit of sparkle you need to kind of jazz up and, spruce up your vinyl. So we're just going to apply this coat of epoxy all over the cup. Again, I'm going top to bottom, including the very bottom that is all stainless steel. Again, that will get covered up with spray paint and some inks, but we want to make sure that we also coat that section in some epoxy as well to obviously create and protect the entire project and the entire cup in case we run into any issues down the line. So once I've gotten my coat of epoxy on there, I'm going to torch this, and then of course I will let it spin for about 6 to 8 hours before I apply another coat of epoxy. So this, because it's been so warm, thankfully has only taken about 8 hours to be, able for me to touch without it being tacky. So I've been able to move into second coats of epoxy really quickly. You could also choose to do a flood coat, which I've talked about before. So a flood coat is when you apply another layer of epoxy before your first layer of epoxy has fully dried. And that's usually at like the 3 to 4, maybe 5 hour mark, depending on your area. So for an epoxy like Flint Sisters Premium Epoxy, I usually can wait about 4 hours, and then my cup is still tacky. So I'll be able to create that chemical bond between that original layer of epoxy and my second coat of epoxy, and not have to wait for the cup to fully sort of dry, if you will, in order to then do my next coat of epoxy. So I hope that makes sense, but of course, if you have questions, leave those down in the comment section. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of some extra glitter here to this cup here. So I'm taking that beautiful purple mix that I made in my last video. Of course, I will list all the glitters that were part of that mix right here on the screen, as well as down in the description box in case you'd like to grab up these glitters. So, and I'm just taking this purple glitter and I am putting that in kind of all of those deep purple sections, just a little bit of sprinkle here and there. I'm not getting every single section, so please don't think that I am. I'm just kind of trying to highlight some of those sections that potentially will be showing through when I do the distressing of this cup, okay? Once I'm satisfied with how much of the purple glitter I've added, we'll move into Watermelon Felon. So Watermelon Felon is a Maisha Creations glitter that I'm going to go ahead and add to the pink roses that are all over this cup. I really love this color, Watermelon Felon, as far as the glitter goes. It is beautiful. I've used it in a couple tutorials this past summer quite a bit. It's been like my favorite. I'm almost low on it too, so I got to make sure I stock up on that as well. And then finally, just to kind of add a little bit of sparkle to some of those other areas that I didn't necessarily have matching glitter to. I decided to use Unicorn Dreams from my Asia Creations, and I really did make sure to kind of pay attention to highlight some of the white sections, but you'll also see that I don't focus on just the white sections. I also put it in some of the other colored sections as well, just other places that kind of felt like it needed a little bit of extra sparkle. And again, at this point, I don't necessarily know which sections of this cup will be showing through in sort of the peekaboo distressing look we're going for, but I'd rather have a little bit of glitter kind of everywhere. That way it doesn't really matter what sections I pick, I'll definitely be able to see all of the gorgeous glitter that's underneath and on top of this vinyl. So I'm going to let this sit and I'm going to let it cure for, again, 6 to 8 hours or so until it is fully cured, and then apply my second coat of epoxy before we get into the next step. So after the 2 coats, I'm now ready to do any necessary sanding that we'll need to do. So I am going to go pretty heavy on the top rim here because we're going to be adding some spray paint on top. I want to make sure that my line of stainless steel is a little bit deeper than it normally is on any cup, just because I will have to sand again, and will sand again in between my 2 final coats, because we want to also make sure that after we've spray painted that again we expose that stainless steel to ensure that we get a nice good seal at the top rim. So we're going to go ahead and get this on my cup cradle here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be using some painter's tape in order to kind of cover up some of this vinyl here so I can get it ready to be spray painted. So this is not necessarily something you have to do. This is just another unique and fun way to create some of those distressed areas without having to spray paint the entire cup and then use acetone and rubbing alcohol in a combination to remove the spray painted areas that you want to expose whatever's underneath. I tried this a little bit differently, and I kind of am digging the way that I did it this time versus sitting there and, you know, taking acetone and rubbing out different sections, because here I was really able to be thoughtful in which sections I wanted to remain exposed as far as the vinyl went, like which sections I wanted to make sure were able to be seen after I finished all of my distressing. And really it was a lot less work, even though it was a lot of work up front, but a lot less work at the back end with having to try and remove some of those stubborn pieces of stubborn sections of alcohol inks that potentially would have gotten or could have gotten into my vinyled areas or over the epoxy. Sometimes it can be a little bit hard to remove that alcohol ink off of like your epoxy layer. So this also helps in that respect as well, because then I didn't have to worry about being super careful with when I was applying my alcohol inks and making sure they didn't run all over the place, because I had these pieces of tape in place the entire time. So really I'm very sporadically and randomly placing all of these different sections of painter's tape all over in different sizes. And then obviously I don't want these pieces of painter's tape to be super like, you know, straight and rigid as they're kind of looking right now. So we are going to take a craft knife and I'm going to go ahead and kind of make some really just jagged edges along the, you know, straight edges of all of this tape, because I don't want it to look, you know, look like strips of tape that I just pulled off a cup. I want it to look more, you know, uniquely distressed and uniquely placed, if that makes a little bit of sense there. So this is just obviously so we don't have those harsh lines and harsh edges. And again, that I won't have to go in with like a Q-tip or something and, you know, distress those edges. That is something that you could do if you didn't want to or didn't trust yourself to be able to cut like wavy and funky lines into your tape without damaging your epoxy. You certainly could, you know, go through this entire process, and then before you do your coats of epoxy, just use a Q-tip to kind of distress some of those edges so that they're a little bit more irregular and not so straight edged. So that's also an option as well. So I'm not going to make you watch me do this entire, you know, cutting and of all these sections. We'll go into a quick speed session right here of me just literally creating these jagged edges. You also could take like a pen or something and draw, you know, the edges you want to cut if you don't think that you'd be able to do it with just freehand like I'm doing, but whatever works for you. Once though I have gotten this all kind of distressed, or, you know, the tape applied the way I want, I'm going to take this outside and spray paint it with a flat white spray paint. So we're using a primer paint here. I have my inks ready to go, but before we do inks, I'm going to take spray paint, Center Stage, and Dreamy Lavendar and literally spray them onto this paper plate. We're going to go back to using my magic erasers here, and we're going to apply this paint, which kind of matched my vinyl, into different sections. I'm not going to use a whole lot of this paint, but I am going to use a pretty decent amount kind of all over the cup between this Dreamy Lavender color and Center Stage from Colorshot. And I really wanted to show you that there are more ways to use spray paint, and you don't always have to default to just using inks. Oftentimes you can use spray paint just like you would inks, except for your spray paints are not going to blend. But they do make a really beautiful sort of sponged look if you're looking for more of a sponged look over a peekaboo. I'm going to be using this in combination with alcohol inks. So I wanted some of these other colors on here because these are not colors you'd be able to necessarily get in ink form, and I didn't want to, play scientist, so to speak, and try and figure out how I could mix those colors with the inks that I have. So I decided that just going ahead and using the spray paint would be a great way to sponge on those colors and get those present to match up with the vinyl, and just show you another unique and fun way that you can use your spray paints. Once I have let that dry, we're going to go ahead and get our cups prepped for adding inks. This final color that I'm adding to this medicine cup is Black Hole as well as Phone Home. I'm mixing those two colors together to create like a deep navy color. And then my final cup will be filled with 91% rubbing alcohol. So all the inks are here listed on the screen, the ones that I use. They are all Jen's Crafted Gems inks. You certainly don't have to use these ones. I will link them, of course, down in the description box. If you have other inks that are comparable, certainly go ahead and use those. You still will be able to create a really beautiful design. So we're going to take our magic erasers, our little pieces of sponge from our magic erasers, and we're literally just going to go to town and start dabbing. So I am starting with my lightest color here, and this is Lil Witchy from Jen's Crafted Gems. This was in her dollhouse pack. I'm starting with my lightest colors first because I know that my darker colors are really going to begin to overpower if I start with them first. So a way to avoid that is by starting with my lighter colors, really making them real prominent and real like in your face first, and then just taking my darker colors to cover up any extra white space that I have along the cup. So now we're using Batty Blood, which is a hot pink color. It's a really beautiful pink that I love to use. And so we're just dabbing that around those purpled areas, and I'm really starting to with like surrounding my paint sections. And I really just wanted to try and create, kind of a really unique look, but also make it look like the paints were inks in the sense that it kind of all goes together. So you'll see me stamp my inks on top of the spray paint as well to almost give the look like it's blended, while we know, of course, it isn't actually truly blended because you can't blend spray paints like you can inks. Now I'm going to go in with T-Pog, which is actually now named Villain on Jen's website. So I'm just literally going through, and I don't know that I necessarily need to really explain this. Inks are just something that you really just have to go for. I can say that I've had a lot of failed ink projects, but I've never gone into an ink-based project with a real idea. I might have a color palette in mind, but I kind of just let the cup and the canvas speak to me and kind of just decide where I'm going to place my colors, what colors I know complement each other really nicely, and place them next to each other. And then, of course, at the end, we'll do a bit of blending, which will really just help to kind of bring the whole vibe of the inks together in that blend, because then it looks super purposeful, almost watercolor-like. It's literally my favorite part of the process when it comes to using inks. So I'm going to speed through the rest of this session, and then I'm going to show you how I like to blend my inks and what my method is for blending, in case you're struggling with that sort of process of using inks. With all my inks applied, now for the blending process. So I always take either a clean sponge or a clean paintbrush, depending on what method I'm using to apply my inks. And I dab that directly in the alcohol, and then I will dab off a little bit of that alcohol on a paper towel, because I don't want this to become too saturated with alcohol, because then all of my inks and blending will kind of start to go all over the place. I dab in some of the places that I want to have the inks kind of blend together, and then you'll see that I am literally blowing on my cup. I'm blowing on the cup because I'm blowing those inks that are now starting to sort of spread out or widen with the addition of the alcohol. I'm spreading that out to kind of create different cells. It also helps to to blend that color into the next color. And I'm doing this all the way around the cup. I always try and start with my lightest colored sections first before I move into the darker sections, because obviously whatever is on that sponge will sort of, you know, transpose onto other sections. So I'm trying to be mindful that I'm not darkening this cup too much, and I'm still able to keep the vibrancy of some of those lighter colors that are on the cup. You also will note that there are several white sections still on this cup. That is all where the tape is. So no point in going directly over the tape. I did go all the way around all the edges on the cup or along the tape, but I didn't go all the way over the tape because of course that's not actually going to be seen. So the last thing I'm going to do before we remove the tape is I'm taking this purple holographic foil that I got from a Vinyl Gallery. I'll link it down in the description box and it's here on the screen. And I've taken a section of this and I've just wrapped it around my cup with the inks still wet. I'm now going to take my heat gun and really just kind of rub it all over, or apply heat all over. Take a paper towel or take just something that you can rub nicely and rub all of the foil all over. And then I'm going to remove this sheet of foil, and different sections of this foil are going to stick directly to those white inks, leaving this really fun design. So this is a tip picked up from Myra over at Myra Makes It. It literally is something that I've never been super successful at doing. So this was the first time that I was able to nail this. I definitely think that the application of heat and me using a napkin or something a little bit softer than using the felt side of my squeegee tool was much more helpful. That way I wasn't getting like full sections of foil applied. I really just wanted kind of those hints of that purple holographic foil to show up. And so kind of doing those two things really did help to change how this was coming out for me, because I was not getting great results when I was trying this before and I could not figure out what was going wrong. So heat and a combination of that napkin or something just softer to rub the foil sheet into the cup was definitely the key to getting this to work. So now that I've applied different little pieces of foil all over, I'm ready to go ahead and remove the tape. That way we can set this cup aside to let the inks dry. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed through removing all of these sections of tape. I really am starting to, like, this was when I started to get really excited with how this was looking. I was so excited and just like starting to absolutely fall in love with this cup at this point, because it was coming out better than my original vision. And so I'm literally in love with this cup already. So the last thing that I want to do before I'll set my inks to dry on my turner is I'm going to take a white acrylic paint pen and I'm just going to go along all of those distressed edges of the different sections that are, you know, peekabooed out, if you will. And that just sort of made them a little bit, you know, more, it stood out a little bit better, and it really kind of brought focus to more of the distressed look all over. And now I'm just adding just a few dots kind of. I was getting like a nebula galaxy vibe of like the background of this cup, and so I just thought adding a little bit of that white pen as like dots and stars would really just kind of feed into that kind of design look that it kind of turned out looking like. So what I'll do with this now, after I finish applying my ink, I'm going to set this on my turner to dry. I don't ever seal my inks, as I've told you guys before. I don't seal them. I just let them dry overnight and make sure they're super dry before I go into my coats of epoxy. So we are now going to work on our 2 final coats of epoxy, of course, using Flynn Sisters Premium Epoxy. And let's go ahead and take a look at the final result. So I hope that you guys loved today's tutorial. Definitely make sure that if you did, comment below what you loved, what you'd love to see me try next, and of course give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. See you soon!